Hello, Exiles. It is 8:30 in the afternoon by me. I found out about this all an hour ago, and I immediately popped an Adderall because I was skipping today, thinking there's no way they're gonna drop another four. They did. They dropped another 4 Ascendancies. And we're gonna get right into it because, quite frankly, I do love doing this, even if I was kind of hoping for a break from making these videos late in the evening. But here we are again. Oh my goodness. I have to say, as far as the batches are concerned, this is probably my favorite batch. I like every single one of these a lot, and we're going to get right into why. We're going to start from the bottom this time, going from up, just to switch things up. The final Templar Ascendancy revealed, Puppeteer. It's amazing how quickly you think you know what you're going to do, and then you see something and you're like, what if I didn't do that? What if I played with my flesh puppets? +4 to level of all raised zombie gems, and in order to get to it, you have to get Graveyard Shift, which is movement speed for corpses nearby. Your zombies do not require a corpse to be raised, and also they count as corpses. This exists in like part of it at least on a unique called Akuna's Will, which basically makes your zombies count as corpses. And that's always been kind of interesting because you can like detonate dead them. And then you add in a bunch of extra like zombie gem levels for free. It is your ascendancy, but oh my goodness. I was doing the math on this earlier, and these guys, with that, they're not hard to get to level 30. A level 30 raised zombie with investment on the tree and whatnot, it's really not hard to get it over like 100,000 hit points. And Detonate Dead being a skill that, you know, like scales off corpse life, that's quite the explosion you're getting off that. And then like, as if that weren't enough, Rotting Might right here, half your strength is added to your minions, 25% increased strength. So that's life fixing for you. That's damage for your minions. It's life for your minions. It's everything. And it leads into a node that not only gives your minions better base crit, but also makes them aggressive. Like, this might be the best minion ascendancy I've ever seen. The only issue is it's kind of all offense. There's a little bit of defense, right? Up here, Marination, and I guess you could squint and say Hexbearer is defense if you use it that way. But, I mean, like, the nodes here are fantastic, and most of them are very accessible. And just as an added note, that whole Detonate Dead spiel, Putrid Conscription is going to be free, because that's more effect to killing your own zombies. Sorry, hard to read. 30% of their maximum life is chaos damage per second. That's also part of Akuna's Will, I believe. Or maybe that, no, it's part of a belt. But, I mean, that's, wow. It's everything you want in a can. You can either do this, you could actually run Putrid Conscription and the whole zombie setup with Raised Zombie of Falling, where the zombie will fall down, basically do an attack, and that's the damage of the spell, but it dies still. So this will trigger and add a degen component to it, which is just very cool. There is so much you can do here that kind of doesn't work that well in the base game yet, but might actually work very well now. Of course, I can't move on without talking about the top end of the wheel here, because so far, I mean, what is it? Rotting Might and Feeding Frenzy are like a 4-point combo. The zombies is its own combo. The Putrid Conscription for the degen and then Hexbearer are just kind of floating, which is very nice because you can get to them. And then we have Marionettes here, which is for animated weapons and animated armor. And I gotta be honest, the fact that this is a 2-point node is kind of insanely good. You get so much flexibility out of that. These others, you gotta invest 4 points. This is just 2 points for what feels like 4 points worth of effect. First of all, double your animated weapons. So it's basically 100% more cast speed when it comes to summoning them. A very large amount of increased damage for your animated guardian. That's kind of interesting because typically animated guardian is not there for damage. It's a support minion. And I imagine it still would be in this build, but it's still nice to have. It's an option. Someone will probably do something unique with it. I know that there's been projects in the past where people made animated guardians that can like Soul of the Shaper and whatnot. Built-in melee splash, which is like, wow, that's a whole support back. And then just because, why not? Defensive items attached to Animated Guardian also apply to animated weapons, which adds to them a level of survivability that was never really there before. I mean, I know one of the few complaints about these things is that they're often frail. I feel like this is enough to push them over the top. And then you have things like Hexbreaker, which is generically good, and these two nodes up here. Marination is just more survivability for you and your minions, and it's a fairly decent amount of it. I like that Marination has kind of synergy with Rotting Might as well, because strength gives you life, and then life gives you energy shield now. But honestly, I think the strongest note on this whole thing, as much as I've raved about it, is Enervating Presence. This is the opposite day version of the Slayer Super Call, which is when an enemy gets to 20% life, you'll just instantly kill them. You know, it's like Pulling Strike, but at a much bigger value. The thing is, this is better. And the reason why this is better is because when you get to an enemy and they lose 20% of their life, they now have a 80% total life pool, but it works opposite of Slayer. The thing with Slayer is the first 50% of your opponent's life pool is now not low life, and then 30% of it is low life. This is reversed, meaning that the first 30% of your opponent's life is not low life, and then the bottom 50% is low life, which means that there is a higher ratio of time an enemy spends on low life. And the reason why I bring that up is because low life effects tend to be really strong, which means that this is just inherently, as an individual effect, much stronger for scaling certain mechanics that maybe get a little overlooked or undertreated. A really good example of this would be if you were supporting your minions with the Behead support, which gives you a massive more multiplier, but only when they're on low life. Now, a larger percentage of your opponent's life is going to be low life than normal. It essentially makes the low life threshold like 62.5%. And I feel like that's something that'll get slept on by people who aren't, ADD crazed build theorists like myself. This is actually a very exciting node. I'm really thinking, do I want to League start Detonate Dead and blow up my own zombies? I don't know. Probably not, because of what's coming next. This is Aristocrat. This is a duelist, and I'm very excited that I have a duelist to be excited about. The other two, they're good, don't get me wrong, but Gambler is a little swingy, and I kind of had a hard time finding nodes that I would want to take on this that I felt were full value. And then Paladin is support-based. Then we get to Aristocrat, and kind of everything that I would hope for is realized. Not only is this good, it's kind of Gemling Legionnaire from Path of Exile 2, but in a way that I think is even better. We're going to start, we should start with where you have to begin. Inherited Fortune is 5 passive skill points. This is very much so in the style of Scion, their Ascendancy, but a little more dedicated to that generalist idea. And it's important to note that for this tree specifically, they tell us that the minor nodes are +1 passive skill point. So no matter what you do on here, you're probably getting about 9 passive skill points. In the words of myself from way too many times over these past few days, that's really good. That's obnoxiously, powerfully good. One of the best parts of playing Ascendant is that you get a ton of skill points. Like, the benefits oftentimes in that Ascendancy don't feel that great, but the skill points then kind of push things over the edge because there's so much you can do with skill points. There's a big reason why when you build a character, there's this dichotomy of my skill points are there to kind of support my character idea. But at the same time, when you have like unique items that do very important things for your build, you can then use skill points to support the holes in your equipment. So having 9 skill points is just tremendous flexibility in a way that I think is overlooked by a lot of people. And it's I don't know, it's like this is just the start of the tree. On the bottom side, things get very stat stacky, which I quite like. You have private tuition, illicit gains, and fancy foil. This feels like a choose two, more or less. I don't think you would ever choose all 3 of these. I could be wrong, but yeah, this feels like a choose two. You're gonna want to pick 2 that you can. They're designed in a way where if you pick 2, you can get the cannot be ignited, shocked, frozen stats on the 2 of them without them blocking each other necessarily. You just have to make sure that your highest stat values go in a specific order, which shouldn't be that hard to do because at the very least, the lowest stat value is going to be the one that doesn't have a massive increased value. It's probably going to be intelligence for most people just because it's a duelist, but you can very easily get to the top side of the tree after going through strength or dexterity and then, ensure that one is the odd one out. They all lead to dreadful attitude, which first of all, it makes it easier to equip things, which is a very nice touch because if one of your stats has to be, quote, low, you want that help with equipping stuff. But at the same time, I don't know that that's necessarily going to be an issue for this character because you are incentivized in this same node to get like all attributes as high as possible. And I think that's really cool. There's some other uniques that actually work with this now that I think about it. Fractal Thoughts really pushes you to have, what is it? I believe it's strength. Yes, strength, dexterity, intelligence. I would even say maybe Fractal Thoughts is like designed for this Ascendancy. I should have had this in the list far earlier. But oh my goodness, actually, the more I'm looking at this, ton of extra stats, right? We're looking at a ton of extra stats. You kind of dumpster your intelligence, but then the intelligence that you do get is going to give you a very nice life value to kind of make up for some other things. You're getting more damage scaling. You're getting a huge crit multiplier. You're getting a ton of extra dexterity. There's something there. Someone is going to stack stats and they're going to have a great time with it. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to the top side. because the top side is where things get very classically Gemling Legionnaire. +1 to level of all skill gems is just a generically good node. Of course, in Path of Exile 1, typically melee skills don't love this as much, but there are some exceptions. And you don't have to play a melee skill on this character. You have so many skill points, you can definitely go to a weird part of the tree and go nuts with it. We then have Gemline Cap and Centerpiece, which are connected off of that, and this is where the tree kind of comes alive if you're going to go to the top side. +3 to level of all non-exceptional support gems. This is really good. What does that mean, though? Exceptional support gems are Enlighten, Enhance, and Empower. Obviously, it would be a little too powerful to have +3 to level of all exceptional support gems, because then you... This right here, Family Heirlooms, would like go to the moon immediately, because that would just be Empower, scaling your skill levels to absurd amounts, in addition to making your support gems stronger, because support gems do gain a lot of value just in general as they level up, some more than others, but specifically awakened support gems are going to be even that much more punchy. A lot of them also sometimes don't get like certain effects until they reach quote max level at 5th. So now you only have to get it to level 2 and it'll activate right away. So that's kind of some early game quality of life that I want to call attention to. But the biggest node is Centerpiece. That quality cannot be slept on. They did a whole rework not that long ago that made quality much better. I have a near and dear gem to my heart to kind of explain this. Dominating Blow of Inspiring. This is the other way of playing Dominating Blow, which is still one of my favorite skills in the game. You can see here the skill inherently sacrifices some of your minion count to give you a massive like boost to your character from minion damage at 250% of the value. 15% is a pretty significant gain here. This takes the 250 and brings it up to 287.5, and that's not including the 20% that the gem will just naturally get because you quality it. So you're looking at something like 337.5 instead of the normal 250. That is kind of a major bonus to something that is already designed around scaling. And that doesn't even talk about all of the other gems in the game that are going to reward you for investing in the quality. And then, of course, we cannot forget Ashes of the Stars exist, kind of giving you even more of the Ascendancy at a greater value. And honestly, this is a stat that, or these are stats typically that you want to keep stacking. And unfortunately, you have to get this from Uber Eater, which, this, you know, definitely makes me want to veer off of Solo Self-On if I'm going to do anything with it. But I mean, that's very doable. Overall, I really like the flavor of this one. Aristocrat might be my favorite just because I feel like you could start any character you want on this, and then you could just change what you're doing. the ultimate plan B Ascendancy, because there's always something else you can do with it, and there's definitely going to be at least a few skills that benefit extremely hard from +1 generic level, because I mean, again, bringing up Dominating Blow, this is a skill that you want to get levels on, typically, even if it's the non-inspiring version, that it is difficult to get levels on. +1 to all levels is a big deal for it, and that's kind of why Architect of Chaos is good, because if you have the Val version, you can get +3. And there's a lot of skills like that that don't have good tagging that scale well with levels. And that really says nothing of how good Gemline Cap actually is. This is a very small thing on the surface, but across 5 support gems, all supporting one skill, each of them now adding a little bit more % more damage. This ends up being a lot of damage, and it has some beneficial qualities that go elsewhere. Some supports, like Corrupting Cry here or Decay, really scale hard. Oh, you know what? Impending Doom as well. I completely forgot about Impending Doom. Those 3 are almost an entire archetype where gem levels are very important for it, but it's not that easy to get them. A level 21 Corrupting Cry is 679 DPS. A level 24 one is 977. That's enormous. And, you know, you can do Corrupting Blood Warcry stuff. This is already on its own kind of a deceptively strong addition. And there's a lot you can do with various skills that kind of work this way. I would say this is probably not an Ascendancy for newer players. You need to know a little bit about what you're doing to make full use of these stats up here, because these can feel good early on, and then once you get out of the out of the campaign in maps, these don't do anything at all unless you're really finding ways to lean on them. Third up, we have Blind Shaper, our final Shadow Ascendancy. Oh boy, there is some big time big boy stats in this one. It is one of those Ascendancies where you are funneled to an initial node. In this case, you're going to be blind, which, I mean, that's what it is, right? That said, 20% less accuracy and evasion rating is a small price to pay for base crits of 12%. that's tremendous, especially with certain equipment that normally has a low crit chance. There's a lot of, just in general, there's like a lot of unique equipment where getting a good base crit isn't the easiest thing in the world. This is like, oh, any weapon in the game can have the crit scaling of a wand. It's just good. And that's the start of the tree. You then have to make a choice. Going to the right, you have Lightless and Formless. This is, what is it, Shade of the Lightless, the body armor from Abyss, basically, but you have to spend 4 points for it, which I think is a little meh, and yet at the same time, the effects are rather strong. Lightless on its own is perfectly serviceable as 2 points for an Ascendancy, because you can get a lot of maximum life and a lot of maximum mana just from stacking Abyss Jewels, and Abyss Jewels are already very good. This very quickly becomes like 25% maximum life and mana, which on its own is like, it's okay, but when you factor in all the stats you're getting from those Abyss Jewels as well, this kind of starts to go to silly places with great power. The one that kind of catches me off guard is Formless. We can't evaluate Formless right now because Shade Form has only ever gone to level 20. Currently, Shade Form has a base duration of 3 seconds and a cooldown of 40 seconds. But for that short duration, you're basically immune to physical damage. That's really good for when you're bossing because it means you have very specific moments where you can just man up against the boss on a character that probably normally can't, right? You're confident for 3 seconds dealing additional damage, and that's uptime, which is kind of a stat that I think goes overlooked. The thing is, you do get an effect, you do get an effect like Shroud of the Light, or you do get an Abyss Jewel effect like from the Ascendancy in Shroud of the Lightless that gives you increased maximum life per Abyss Jewel affecting you, and you can get 3 Abyssal Sockets on the armor as well, and Elemental Penetration. So you get kind of the Ascendancy from this body armor, which is already very good and desirable. Or you spend 4 points and you get it on any character, but you lose some Abyss Jewel Sockets. And I guess my question is, how good is Formless? Like, is the cooldown much shorter? Because if it is, this is definitely good enough, especially with the increased skill effect duration. That's just a rather good generically like attached stat. So whether or not this is actually worth it is hard to say. Definitely don't do this at the start, right? Lightless and Formless. You're not going to have Abyss Jewels. I know there's like ways with Calgarian shipping to kind of get them a little earlier, I believe. But I mean, are you really going to be rushing jewel sockets for jewels that aren't well rolled? With Lightless, that's just not, it's not good value. You want to go elsewhere at the start if you are planning to do something like this. But that's okay, because right away you can get Shapeless. Shapeless is nasty, insane goodness. It's basically the Assassin node, but I would say better. The reason why I say it's better is because even though the elusive effect doesn't go as high, what elusive does is very strong. It gives you damage avoidance and it gives you movement speed, and everyone likes movement speed. But in this particular case, elusive is removed from you at 50% effect. This is actually a buff. If you don't know why, it actually says here in the baseline text, you can't remove elusive until it hits 50% normally. And the reason why that's important is because the buff decays, which means that when elusive gets low, normally there is a period of time where your defenses are just a little less good and your speed is down. So like actually the odds of getting hit are kind of double compounded. And yet elusive is still kind of a good effect because it's not that hard to play around. It's actually one of those things where you can control the uptime a little bit. So it's rather usable compared to a lot of other kind of wishy-washy things. This removes the wishy-washiness and you can still scale the effect to higher points. So getting a ton of movement speed for mapping and just some extra survivability, especially in high pressure situations, is not that difficult. So Shapeless is very powerful. You get it early, you get some crit on your character, and you're going to feel things get really smooth. And guess what? You have crit on your character because Sightless is so good. Now, the other 2 arcs of the tree coming off of Sightless, we have Restless and Faithless, and then Directionless and Careless. I'm going to start with Restless and Faithless because we should save the best for last. Restless is just a clear speed engine for the same reason that a similar node on Gladiator is a clear speed engine. The Gladiator one requires them to be bleeding. This is, you need to have corpses that are cursed. So I'm guessing you curse enemies and kill them, and then everything else around them is now, it's popcorn. These explosions drastically improve clear speed. So again, if you're planning to do something very powerful with this tree, you probably take this other stuff early because this will kind of support your clear. This is survivability. And you want to get into maps and make money because you're going to need some support for the other stuff generally, especially the Abyss stuff or the yet unspoken about stuff. But Faithless, I like this node. The problem is that Anathema does a lot of very good things, and I'm not sure that 1 ring slot or 2 Ascendancy points is worth more than the other. But that kind of seems to be the fault with this Ascendancy in general, is it provides effects you can get elsewhere. The thing is, because you can get this on a ring already, this almost has dangerous hot garbage energy to it, because I'm not entirely sure what character really wants this that can't just run the ring. If they exist, they're probably very happy, but otherwise, I don't know. I think you can go somewhere else on the tree and get something better than Faithless. All right, let's get into the best part of it, because Directionless is dirty. Projectiles have 50% chance to return to you. This is a less good version of Nimbus, which is fair, because Nimbus is an uber drop, again, from a ring, just like Faithless. The difference being, this gives you half of the effect. That said, the effect is much, much stronger. It's important to note that this returning projectiles effect is not the same as the support. There is no, like, less damage modifier to it. Those returning projectiles do full damage. So you want to find a skill that will fire projectiles randomly and have them come back, and somehow consistently have both sides hit. I think Molten Strike is like the most generic good example of this, where even if the balls are going everywhere, they're still kind of spawning from the same place, and I think they're already kind of random in how they work. And now this almost is like just, okay, 50% more damage. And if you like that, good news. It goes right into 2 additional projectiles, which is exceptionally good when your projectiles are already coming back to you. You can't use this with everything, but the things you can use it with are incredibly powerful, and you're going to have huge base critical strike chance for weapons. Combine that all, and actually just kind of look at this, it's like, play Molten Strike. Take these 3 nodes, play Molten Strike. You actually don't even need to like do other stuff or wait. You just take these 3 nodes and do Molten Strike. And then you can either take Lightless for like a bunch of extra scaling in your life and mana. You can take Restless for like extra clear, or you can take Shapeless and just have better survivability and movement speed. It's all good. As long as you're taking these 3 nodes, Directionless, Sightless, and Careless, a Molten Strike character is probably going to slap. It's going to be a little weird because you're a shadow, but these effects are so strong, and you don't have to do something crazy like get a Nimbus. So it's kind of like, this is like solo self-found for Molten Strike characters in a big way. So overall, Blind Prophet, kind of a whole bunch of different unique items at home as an Ascendancy, but one of those unique items is Jungrown, or Nimbus rather, but Jungrown at home, it sounds funnier, so I'm going to stick with that. And this is very good. I think no matter what you plan to do, if you're a shadow and you go this and you take these 3 nodes, you're going to have a good time as long as you're playing a skill that properly benefits from it. And there's plenty of them. But enough about that. Wildspeaker, our final Ranger Ascendancy. This one is, well, I mean, Servant of Arakaali was kind of interesting. This is like the missing piece, I guess, the missing pieces. I guess technically we don't have Aspect of the Crab anywhere, but that's the least exciting of all of the aspect skills, so I'm not too surprised by that. Aspect of the Avian, Aspect of the Cat, and unlike in Servant of Arakaali, these are both level 30 and have no reservation. Arakaali was just the skill. You didn't get it for free, which I thought was very strange. I kind of hope they change that, because it's kind of a lackluster travel node to like get to better stuff. These are much more exciting and strong too, for that matter. Where to start? Let's go with Avian, because honestly, I think Avian is a little slept on for what it does. It is one of the less awesome aspects off the bat. And what I mean by that is Aspect of the Cat and Aspect of the Spider are usually the ones that get used the most. But what it does is actually very strong. You have a rotating buff, one that gives you movement speed and one that gives you double damage chance. And what's interesting about these is they apply to your minions. This and Spider are really the only aspect skills that kind of work with minions as well. I guess Crab you could also count because that's more of a defensive layer. But minion movement speed is not a stat to sleep on, and neither is minion double damage chance. And that's important because you get this right at level 30, no reservation, and then you get Above the Clouds, which gives you triple the effect on the buff. That is wild. That's 42% movement speed and 36% double damage chance. I mean, holy cow. The only issue is it's a rotating buff, right? You have one for 4 seconds, you have the other for 4 seconds. So there's chances you'll run into moments where you have the wrong one when you need it, but otherwise, at some point, you're gonna have the uptime you need. And when they're up, it's going to actually be a very impactful thing. And not to mention, you can still go for the unique items to support the build, like Talons, for instance, which can change the duration of Avian's flight. So if what you really want is the double damage, you can get -2 and make that much shorter, or you can go for plus duration, and then you can do the opposite with the gloves. So you could actually make one 6 seconds long and the other 2 seconds long and kind of completely flip the duration scaling on the two. so that one is up much more often than the other. This is just kind of generally a lot better than Aspect of the Avian has ever been. I'm kind of interested to see who makes use of it, because I think it has a lot of potential. And fitting kind of the minion theme as just its own little 2-point node, Pack Mentality, for summoning Spectral Wolves. The only problem with this node is the same problem as most of these, where we don't have sockets. With Arakaali, it's a little different because we know we're getting a better version of that skill than exists on the item. This is actually a worse version of a skill that exists on a weapon. And then otherwise it's like the same generic version that you find on the ring, for instance. So it's not bad, especially because the trigger rate is 100%. And it is just a little bit of bonus. Like if you were going minions properly, you might consider this. But I think where this is really going to shine is you pick this up as your first Ascendancy and you plan to respec it later. Because it's going to be very powerful early. It will carry you through the campaign, and then it will fall off. And it's fine that nodes exist like that, because honestly, it makes leveling more streamlined and easy. Especially if you're going to play a minion build on a character, like a ranger, who doesn't have access to minion nodes right away. This kind of makes up for that in a big way. This is just kind of like good design from a gameplay flow standpoint. The other floating node we get is Primal Instinct right here. Primal Instinct is rather interesting. It completely solves your spell suppression investment from the get-go, but it reduces the amount of damage it prevents. So when I look at this, I almost think maybe this is intended for acrobatics, because this removes your ability to suppress spell damage, but it gives you a chance to outright dodge the entire hit. And the issue being you need, what is it? I think you need 150% spell suppression to get it capped out. That's very, very attainable as a Wildspeaker now, and it completely removes the downside. So I feel like maybe that's the intention. Either way, this is another one that's very good early. Eventually you get your full spell suppression, and then you can get rid of this. Or maybe this is good enough where saving enough skill points means you can invest in other things, and you don't worry about it anymore. Now, we still have another aspect skill to talk about. Aspect of the Cat is a little different, and it's traditionally good for different reasons. You have another rotating buff like Aspect of the Avian. In this case, it's stealth and agility. The stealth gives you crit chance, stealth, and like damage avoidance, kind of the same value as elusive. So, I mean, that's good on its own. The other half is just attack or cast speed, which again, very good on its own, 16%. Otherwise crit chance, so you kind of have a swapping bonus that is, I would say there's pretty similar value in both of them. So you're never going to be like lower on DPS, generally speaking, as long as you're playing a crit build that cares about attack speed, which is most of them if you're a ranger. Now, what makes this so interesting is Feral's Fur, which is an incredibly rare item, and now also an Ascendancy notable. This is Feral Symmetry, which is, wow. Whenever you gain cat stealth, you go right to your maximum frenzy and power charges. You also get additional maximum frenzy and power charges. So this is almost like the +4 minimum node, but you can scale it, which is a lot better. It is actually just a lot better because scaling frenzy and power charges is good. There's not much else to say about it. Feral's Fur is like one of the top uniques in the game, I want to say. I'm sure it's fallen off a little since it's like Inception, but it's still used by a lot of people. There's at most a 6-second delay between when your next one goes off, unless you invest in a lot of duration. So you kind of want to avoid too much duration. But as long as you don't have too much duration, this really is just uptime for free on your charges, unless something is removing them, which, you know, nullifier enemies exist, which is annoying. But one thing that's kind of interesting about this is that with enough less duration, you can actually keep your charges coming in very consistently, almost like a supplement for Flicker Strike. The problem is you can't support this, but, and this is part of what goes back to Servants of Arakaali, this grants level 30 Aspect of the Cat skill, but that doesn't mean you can't put Aspect of the Cat on something else and still gain the benefit of the free reservation and Fearful Symmetry later. So keep that in mind. Getting this whole thing working, you don't have to like give up on the ability to augment either Aspect of the Avian or Aspect of the Cat. You can get that on a piece of equipment later and then still benefit from it being free, which I think that's another thing that might be overlooked by some people, because that's a big deal for those, the way the buffs work and how you want them to be rotating, if you want them to last longer or shorter, that whole thing. In the final wheel, it's kind of pick a path, all leading to Boon of the First Ones, which we'll get to that in a moment. Scourge of the Wilds, named for the Scourge Unique Claw. Increases and reductions to mini damage also affect you at 150% of their value. This is generically exceptionally good. The fact that you get this and you can have any other weapon you want in your main hand is a rather big increase. Also the dexterity scaling. Because of the dex stacking, that if you're taking that kind of takes some of the teeth away from Primal Instinct, because the Mage Main Keystone will give you spell suppression for dexterity. And if you're going to stack some dexterity, you probably just want to do that and then use these 2 points for Primal Instinct elsewhere. Great Wolf's Call is just another fantastic node. You have Tailwind. You have Tailwind. And then you and party members share charges with each other, which is kind of just a nice little benefit. I would say maybe there's some ideas for like making this the central character for like this would be like the carry of a group where you have people supporting them, right? And this guy inherently creates a situation where support characters can support them better, which I think is kind of interesting. Even though I don't like support, it is there. And then Tailwind is just action speed, which is a multiplier on any of your speed values. Movement speed, attack speed, cast speed, 8% more, generally good. And also it helps you avoid things like chill, right? It directly counteracts chill, in fact. It's the same value, just the positive version of it. This is a proper last but not least situation, because my goodness, to talk about just getting an item's effect from your ascendancy tree. This is Inspired Learning. Inspired Learning is a very expensive item because it's basically the baby version of Headhunter, but also it's only a jewel. And if you get one of these and your character is killing stuff, it's good for you. Just full stop. This is severe juice while mapping. All right, this is your go. You can steal haste, you can steal auras, you can steal extra damage effects. As long as you're not doing something that locks your character out of certain damage types, this is very good. And it actually goes right back to this character kind of being the target of a support group, where people supporting this and you having this makes it so you don't want to run brutality or some sort of effect that's going to lock you out of certain damage types. You just want more of everything, because you're going to be getting everything from the rare modifiers and you want to keep those. You want to benefit from them. Overall, it just incredible ascendancy. Again, I think all 4 of these are very good. Aristocrat, probably the one that's going to require the most knowledge in the game to properly make use of, and yet at the same time, if you have no idea what you're doing, this is also not that bad, just because, I mean, more skill points, very generic bonuses. Puppeteer feels like the most genuine minion ascendancy we've had in a while, probably because it doesn't try to be too generic in the way that the design has taken things. It very specifically calls out certain minion types and just makes them work. Blind Shaper is actually just this whole thing they've been doing where they've been like looking at powerful unique items and they're like, what if you didn't have to use the item, but you got the effect anyways? And I'm very interested in this one because I want to know what level 30 Shadeform does. I want to know just how good Directionless is. Like, how good is Nimbus if the return chance is only 50%? And I think the answer is still completely busted, especially considering you could very well like do a Nimbus build on this character and just like spec out of Careless and Directionless later and go get something else. That's also very good. And then Corpse Explosion effects are so good for clear. You've got some weird curse going on. There's a lot here, and the reason why I like it, why I'm pretty optimistic about it, is it's all very generic. These effects that are good on any character almost. Or rather, you can fit any character to make use of them. The only real requirement is that you are attacking with a weapon, because if Sightless isn't doing anything for you, that's a pretty big downside. And of course, Wildspeaker bringing minions to Ranger, which is not something that's typically done. Null's Inclination, kind of jumping into my mind at the last second, a bow that is for kind of minion scaling, which is, actually, let's pull that up. Null's Inclination gives you that damage per dexterity node again. Those will stack, so 2% damage per 5 dexterity. That's pretty interesting on its own. And then it triggers on kill, which you can definitely make kill potential happen here if you want to, and potentially run even more minions. I'm sure there's a much better way to make use of this specialization than Null's Inclination, but it is interesting that it's here and available. Definitely something to keep in mind. I'm not going to be the guy who builds around it, man. That's like too far out even for me. As with everything in the Legacy of Phrecia League, what's so great about this is we just have the options. We have so many options to do things that either weren't quite strong enough before, or maybe were actually just kind of nerfed out of the game, and now we have them again. And just look at it, man. Inspired Learning on a character baseline is really cool, I have to say. Scourge with any weapon is also really cool. Any weapon, any skill. Normally, you have to do something like, what is it? Here we go. Normally, you have to have something like Absolution of Inspiring or Dominating Blow of Inspiring, which kind of gives the effect built in, or you have to use the Scourge Claw. So the fact that you can get that on any weapon is kind of like just a really interesting way to make something happen. It even opens up kind of spell casting options. Back minion damage in place of spell damage and get a bigger value of it. And you can get that on things like cluster jewels, which can apply to any character. So kind of a surprisingly versatile ascendancy here that I think you could find some really out-of-the-box ways to play it. All right. That is the end of it. We are 15 out of 19 ascendancies. I would not be surprised if we got the last 4 tomorrow. And I'm going to be perfectly honest, if we get the last 4 tomorrow, we might get I can't talk. We might get a release date as early as tomorrow with the last 4, or shortly after that, I would think, because these are the hardest working developers at all of Grinding Gear Games. They are moving so fast. Major props to the guys on it. Holy hell, these came so fast. And like the way they trickled out, the way they made a big point of us voting to see the teasers, I thought, okay, this is going to be drawn out for a while. No, I feel like we're already almost there. We could be playing this in 2 weeks. That's probably completely unrealistic, but at the pace they're going, I can't be sure. Otherwise, have a good one, Exiles.